Hello, Dave.
Hey, hi there.
Good to meet you.
Good to meet you too.
Out of curiosity, what is your time zone?
I'm in Central, U.S. Central,
Ah, okay. What state?
St. Louis, Missouri.
Ah, interesting. You're just within a few miles of my youngest brother.
Oh, really?
He graduated Washington University and he's been there ever since graduation. He's actually the director of the music library for the last couple decades.
Wow.
Although I think he's moved on to a different library now, but
Right.
I forget which
Where
one. Sorry, you said?
and where are you?
I am just between Seattle and Vancouver in Washington State.
Okay,
On
like Bellingham or something like that.
actually south of Bellingham, about an hour. It's a place called Kamano Island.
Oh,
It's
nice,
real close, to 3 miles within Whidbey Island,
nice.
if you know where that is.
Yeah, I used to live in Seattle, so I have an idea.
Oh, whereabouts in Seattle?
Oh, Queen Anne Hill.
Ah, nice. Because I graduated high school from Lakeside, if you
Okay. No,
know.
I don't. No, I don't remember that. I was lived there for 3 years in the '90s. Oh,
Excuse me.
morning.
Um, I don't know where my water bottle went. Excuse me a second while I go find my water bottle.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So I'm curious, have you attended other GCC meetings before, or is this your first?
Um, I've been to one last week and two this week. So this is my first Saturday.
Okay, so two this week, that means you came both Thursday and Friday then, right? To
Hmm.
the open space for Thursday and the
Hmm.
experiment on Friday.
Hmm.
I'm curious, what keeps you coming back?
Oh, um, something to do. Fills the time.
So what do you do?
Uh, I'm kind of in between things right now. I I've been pretty withdrawn, and I'm just trying to slowly ease back in. And this is a way for me to socialize a little bit um, without anything being expected of me.
So
So,
if I ask you to do something, that'll push you away?
well, I don't know. It depends what you ask me to do, but I kind of more listening than talking and just being present.
So I'm
So,
curious, what were you able to extract of value from yesterday or Thursday, if anything?
oh, it's kind of the usual suspects, I guess. We see the same. I mean, it's sort of the same people both days, and last week it was the same. And there's some people that just sort of show up quite often, like Jazz Winder and Doug Breitbart and Tammy Lee Meyer, and so I've seen them before. I've joined conference calls with them before, and I have kind of known them from the past. And I know your face from your post. I've seen you, I've followed you or connected with you on Facebook, so I recognize your face, even though we've never spoken. Um, yeah. So uh, what did I extract of value? I don't know if that's a question I can answer.
Okay, maybe not of value, but any in particular insights? Anything that was new that made you say, hmm? Or anything that you reacted to and said, that's not right? Or anything that says, hmm.
I think it's, I think even, I think these kind of calls are not that easy to figure out, you know, how to, how to run them or how to make them work for everybody. I think there's sort of like, I see a lot of people expressing dissatisfaction with, I don't know, not being even, the conversation not being evenly distributed, or people, you know, rambling too long, and you know, so 2 days in a row, they kind of, you know, people express that kind of, you know, I feel like you are teaching instead of being there. And Jazz, how are you?
So since it's a matter of record, but I didn't actually attend, do you know who expressed those opinions?
Oh yeah, Jazz, you were there when, what was it that, was it, Doug and Tammy both sort of accused you of being a teaching instead of talking or something like that. Was that, do you remember how that went?
Yeah, not the first time. It's just a clash of styles, I would say. Her style of listening, speaking.
Sam was asking me what I noticed, and I said I noticed that it's it seems to be hard for people to get to moderate and get people kind of distributed evenly, or you know, attention or whatever.
Okay. Are we recording this, Sam?
Yes, we are recording this, yes.
Very good. Okay. So let's start at the beginning of that session. Dave was a little late joining in. So was Tammy. Tammy was quite late, if not very late. Joshua was very, very late. Doug was I was the first one there, or second one there, with Doug. And we were just, before we even started recording, we were just having a little tete-a-tete. And the question I posed, just being a friendly chat, was it's taken us 2 years or thereabouts to get to the stage where we are reasonably honest in our meeting sessions. Why does it take so long? And that sort of conversation spilled over into all the Doug went through all the items that occurred over the last couple of years that went against the grain. We had people come on board who clashed with the GCC panel severely, and that took months and months to overcome and to build a working relationship. I was probably one of the very first ones, because I was quite bombastic to start with, and I prodded for information, and that grated severely. May even be that I was partly instrumental in Lucy leaving, but that wasn't what was discussed. It just kept to the point. And as people joined in, the conversation increased further. More and more, we discussed our styles of talking and not talking and saying things. And it occurred to Tammy that I have a style that seems to grate the way of doing things. I tend to lecture, I tend to teach, and I do tend to still be specific and pedantic, which is true. Because one of the things that happened was I picked on Alex. Alex has a way of, he's got a mind full of sayings which, to me, I tend to question everything. And are they relevant today? So something inside me is telling me that Alex is holding back. He makes comments that are unfinished. You get off there, move the chair back, put the girl down, move away. Now, that's it. No more moaning. Go in the big room. You behave or you get smacky, understand? That's the little one. So I kept prodding Alex, and Anna stepped in. And after a while, I think Tammy was a bit back as well that I shouldn't be doing things. And while that was happening, Alex actually, hello, hush, hush, shush. Alex actually wrote in the comments section in the chat the seeing the inner light. And out of the corner of my eye, I noticed that he'd written in, and I was very grateful to him. So from my point of view, it was well worth that bit of prodding to get that information. And that was the point that I was making, is that people, and I've been making that point consistently all the way along, we're all hiding something. Now, if Alex is hiding something quite as important as that, then that, to me, is kind of like egotistical. I know something that you don't know, and I'm hiding it, and I'm going to play cat and mouse with you to see if you can guess what it is I'm hiding. And if you're doing that consistently ever since I joined, and that can be annoying when the intuition kicks in and says, who's holding back? Shush, shush, bus, thank you. So that kind of continued for the whole session, not just yesterday, today's Saturday. So the first one was Thursday, spilled into Friday. But by the close of Friday, we were working closer and much better. In my humble opinion, what I have done is worthy of being done to take us forward. Otherwise, we're going to be stuck in the same circles of playing guessing games, and we're not going to move forward. At the end of yesterday's session, the whole demeanor had changed, and Tammy herself prodded Alex a bit further regarding his peer-to-peer in his Viacom website, whether that would be of any use really in GCC. Okay, I'm kind of complete on that at the moment. I'll disappear and put this one in with mommy for a little while to calm down. So excuse me, I'll be back in a moment.
Yeah, so just real quickly, I've been trying to pay attention. It's very hard to pick out what you're actually saying.
We can do it again.
Yeah.
I'll be back in just a moment. I promise.
Anyway, hey, David, the reason I asked that question is that we've noticed some of these differences in communication style and behaviors.
Yeah.
One of the experiments we've done in barn raising is to try and collect a set of these things, to try and be very explicit about them. I don't know if in reviewing any of this past history, any of that has become apparent, but there is a file, and it's a sheet right now in Google Docs, that is a compendium of approximately 80 such behaviors. 80 is just a number that was proactively included by all the participants and includes things like, I will interrupt people when I feel like it, or I will wait until someone finishes,
we did that.
or I will use
I chat with Dave after. Excuse me for. I apologize for interrupting. I'll be back in one moment and I'll continue that.
Okay. So anyway, Dave, I've just included that link again in the chat area of this particular Zoom session, in case you hadn't come across it. And that's because barn raising, we're trying to figure out what agreements do we want to make with each other as a starting point for possibly taking action or making decisions? And if we don't understand how we each communicate or participate, then we're continually going to be almost either conflicted or not understanding each other or feeling disrespected or feeling that we're not in communication.
Mm-hmm.
So if I know, for example, that someone is going to be interrupting frequently or using foul language, then when that happens, I'll say, okay, that's that person really doing what they said they're going to do, and I have no way of affecting that, but at least I understand it, okay? Personally, I will try not to interrupt people. I'll try and let them speak. Other people find that, you know, they really want to amplify what someone else is saying by just jumping on it and saying, yeah, yeah, or hell yeah, or fuck yeah, you know, depending on their particular style of communication. So that helps me when I actually see people actually know themselves well enough to actually describe how they're going to show up. And I think that for everyone is an assistance. You know, if I know, for example, that somebody's going to actually, you know, periodically speak for 5 to 10 minutes at a time, and they know that about themselves, that's actually interesting information for me and others. And if I know that Jaswinder is going to hold up 2 fingers in order to say, hey, he's got something to say, then I can say, okay, good. I'm going to wrap up what I'm saying now, and I'm going to listen to Jaswinder. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There is this thing about the rules of conversation, and they are hidden rules. Regardless of whether we've made a set of rules and we've displayed them or not, there are still rules which govern every conversation. So I've taken a note of that. I will save that chat and come back to it later. And now I will admit that I have held back, but the reason for holding back is altruistic. And as you have ascertained quite earlier on, that my reason for being here, for participating, is for the betterment of whatever it is we're doing and moving forward. And I have noticed that one of the rules, which is let's be nice to each other, even if we have to tell little white lies or keep quiet, is operative constantly. Now, the women in any group, and including women to women groups, employ that reason more or less all the time. That does not exclude Tammy. So Tammy holds back. Whereas I'm of the male species, and I tend to think, well, if there's something is being hidden, I really want to know. And as mentioned before, that there are also other bolt-ons for that kind of behavior. And to alleviate that behavior, we really have to bring it out into the open. I have been as open as possible, and more so than needs be all along, and I'm opening up more and more. And I sense others are holding back. So I made it my business some time ago that I would prod and poke, and if necessary, some passion to get behind this reason and actually remove it if possible. I don't know if it's possible, but it's right. And it seems to be working. Every time we have one of these little passionate sessions and it cools down, we work quite well for a while, and then the same behavior pattern comes back. So it needs to be done again for the reminder to set in. That is the kernel in the nutshell, in the nut itself. So the casing is there as well. And in my humble opinion, it's all yours in a mo. All I'm going to say is, in my humble opinion, we are today much better than we've ever done. We're much more honest. And the only other thing I would add is that just because somebody feels offended by something does not mean that we should not discuss it. It's all the more reason why we should discuss it. I'm complete for the moment. Thank you.
I just want to add a perspective, my perspective, to this holding back phenomenon that you're describing. I actually believe that there's a number of reasons for holding back that have nothing to do with ego, or actually are not quite so directly associated with ego, okay? But one of them that is associated with ego is this issue of safety. If you've noticed, over time, women have bounced out of this particular group. And there are not very many women that attend this regularly. The last one was probably Stacy. Lauren, perhaps, you know, and up to a point, Tammy was. Anna bounced out pretty quickly. Lucy bounced out pretty quickly. Heidi bounced out after a kind of an incident that we possibly remember. So this issue about whether people feel safe to participate definitely affects their participation.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that we don't, in our ability or our practice of engaging in disagreement, hopefully in a civil way, but in a hopefully mutually inquisitive and curious way, doesn't affect others and in particular detract from their safety. And I think, unfortunately, we've not figured out how to do that. So I think that the safety of, in particular, a number of women who are active elsewhere in GCC are not actually active here in barn raising. Now, I do personally agree with you that one of the things we are here in GCC to do is to learn how to disagree well, with respect, with curiosity, with generosity, with time and attention. And I don't think that that's actually widely yet understood, or I may be projecting here, but probably even more, it's not widely practiced. And I don't necessarily mean by those who are speaking, I mean by those who possibly are listening as well. That to have the generosity to think that the speaker is actually engaged in a curious and respectful exploration of disagreement, not trying to pick a fight. Really trying to co-evolve our understanding, really trying to learn from each other, and not trying to say, oh, I'm right, you're wrong.
So I would interject here and say one of the things we do, one of the things Tammy is fond of doing, is that for this kind of what we're doing here now, is to take it aside. Let's have a separate room meeting. And we've had several of those, but we've never actually spent the time to go back to those, watch them together, and dissect and see what input we get out of them. So if we're going to tackle difficult subjects, difficult topics individually, how do we bring it back into the group? Not happening. So I tend now to make the difficult topics open so that we do discuss it. So that if you're upset, we can see you're upset and how upset you are. And should we withdraw or continue? So those decisions made collectively are much better than individually. As for people leaving, Lucy was a formidable woman. She still is. Highly intelligent and quite well strung. And she had a tete-a-tete over one word. Okay, I'll stop.
I do want you to continue, Jaswinder, but for Dave's understanding, you may actually have picked this up, but one of the practices that many others do ascribe to, and by the way, I do not, okay, is that we don't speak about people who are not present, okay?
Okay.
I think that, in my opinion, if we're speaking factually with our own personal interpretation, with an intent to actually learn and co-evolve, I think that's in my opinion, legitimate, but I want to at least acknowledge that it's controversial and not widely held. So there are a number of people who say we shouldn't talk about people who are not in the room. I just wanted to expose that. And I'm not saying just Winter's wrong. I'm just saying that has been discussed and it's not yet been agreed. Okay, just Winter, please continue.
So everyone is welcome. Yesterday we started the meeting. There were only 2 people there to start with, and we were having quite a pleasant, calm, cool discussion, which seemed to warm up with each and every individual coming in and putting their input in, which was good. So it wasn't something that built up spontaneously. It was a slow build-up. Everybody had the time for their input. And that, over time, again, we took the time to resolve it. Same with Thursday. So it started Thursday, continued Friday, and here we are on Saturday, and it's a continuation of the same. And there are only 4 people here today. There are holidays and things, and other people are doing things, and other people have gone off on a tryst, which is all bound to happen. But this is valuable time for those who have turned up. They are getting the best value because it's a very small group. We're talking quietly and calmly, and we are going to hold the space for those who want to come and join us. If we do it right, then we become the role models for everybody to join in and do that. And if we don't do it right, then you're quite right, we will keep making the same mistakes. But I could use a different joiner. Although we have made the same mistakes, of late, in the last 6 months or so, the frequency of these take-to-takes has reduced considerably, so that today there are a considerable number of us who meet up and do go through the awkward topics very well now and come to a decent conclusion. I appreciate some of us will forget. I appreciate some of us will want to go back to doing things the way we did it before. Change is not easy. Even I catch myself, having said I won't do something certain way, I catch myself going back to doing it the old way. Changing memory patterns is difficult. It's painful at times. If I berate myself, then I save others the necessity to do that, and make a mental point of not doing it again, and catching myself if I start doing it. The overall movement of GCC today, if I refer back to last week and the week previous, on our Saturdays, last Saturday, we came to a fairly good conclusion about something or other. And then you, Alex, you, Sam, towards the end of it, or at the end of it, said, well, that's a very good thing. I'll make a point of that. And how we do put that together and get it out there. So that Saturday group session or sessions is now getting toward trying to gear up toward doing something concrete, as is the Friday session, as is the Thursday session. So we are moving forward, and I'm very glad to be a part of it. And I'm really complete on that one now. Thank you for listening.
So just to complete the one thought is, David, I included that link in the chat as an invitation for you to peruse with curiosity. And if you so choose to add your own column, or perhaps you've already done it. There is a David in there, but I'm not sure which David that is. To actually fill out that, or possibly add additional questions or behavior identification, so that the rest of us can actually consider them and respond to them. But at least at the very minimum, reviewing it will give you a chance to understand those who participated in that spreadsheet a little bit better. To see, you know, what it is that they're actually agreeing to do or not agreeing to do, or making explicit what they do. Now, I think that's the first step. It was just a very simple question. How are you going to show up to these meetings? But the larger question is, how are you actually going to engage in this larger context, in GCC overall, or in life, or in whatever it is that we're trying to co-create together? But this spreadsheet was just the very first step.
It's a lot to digest.
And it's an attempt to try and figure out, how do we make agreements? Because it's not even clear.
What have you learned from that?
What we've learned is, and what I've learned, okay, not we, because we haven't officially got a we yet, but what I've learned is that we have to start as individuals and declare ourselves, declare what it is that we're trying to do in the world, how it is we're trying to do it, and find other like-minded people. Because there is no central authority right now that's going to say, okay, all of us here, march off in that direction. Okay, there is no such authority today. We're all marching to our own little paths, and when those paths seem to make sense, we've tried to find opportunities to help each other, to amplify each other's impacts. That's what I'm trying to do as a step one. And in so doing, how are those agreements going to work so that I can say, okay, for the next 3 weeks, I'll help you edit this document. Or for the next 6 months, let me see if we can actually create this video together. Or in the next, 12 years, let's try and raise $6 million or $60 million and do the following piece of software, right? We're trying to find those opportunities. But as individuals first, because right now there is no we, there is no us, other than as a collection of individuals, in my opinion. Over. That, by the way, is also another contested topic.
What?
Whether there is a we.
Oh, okay.
Now, from the outside standpoint, there is a you, the GCC, because there is a name that people refer to. So there's an implication that there is an entity out here that right now, in my opinion, is not well defined. Or it's defined in a multitude of ways, let me say that. Over.
Something very interesting Doug said yesterday is that when a person talks about them, then that's sort of an accusational stance. And when that person comes down to we, and there's some sort of progress, and that when the person starts talking in the singular I, and then that person is starting to take responsibility for his or her own conversation and possibly actions. I really don't know whether that applies or not, because he seems to be have psychological training much better than mine, and I'm of the opinion that there are some things that can be said with an I, but when it comes down to doing something, then the we has to resonate somewhere. So Tammy is asking, what is it that the GCC can do for you? What is it you feel that you may need help on to improve or do what you want to do? Is there anything you personally want to do and get it out there? And one of the things I think she mentioned Thursday, is that we have the capability and the capacity to make personal media, should we want to make personal media and display it on Facebook or anywhere else for our own personal use. So that brings the we in, and that's my understanding of it so far, taking an abstract from the conversations, and I'll leave it at that and say I'm complete for now.
Alex?
Yeah, we have a system of communication. Whether we are a group or not, we have a agreement. We have a collection of pages relating to other data. We have quite a lot of people on the Facebook group. So whether or not we are a group, which is this debate that's been going on, is really a moot point, I think. Not worthy of, well, it's worthy of consideration, but only fleetingly, because I think we have an understanding that what's evolving is an emergence rather than a fixed description. You can't pin it down as a group or a tribe or a collection of sovereign entities, because it's something that's emerging out of the evolution of technology with our this intelligence we're using is augmented. So I call it AI because I like the word augmented, but the trouble is when I write it, I have to use the word augmented, because every time I use the abbreviation AI, people automatically think what artificial intelligence. And that's not what I'm referring to. That's a different subject. Over.
Oh, sorry, I think I'm on mute, sorry. Dave, having heard this, given the 30-minute introduction to GCC barn raising, what are you thinking now? What's going through your head about either this is a component that complements Thursday and Friday, or is there a refinement to it? Is there a invitation? Is there a revulsion? Is there a
Interesting
topic
that
of curiosity?
I think it's interesting that you've noticed that women have opted out of this one, that you're curious about that. I've noticed that the women have been a minority in every single one of these calls that I've joined. It's maybe one or two women at the most in every call that I've been on that I can recall. I think I've seen Alex and Jazz have been in just about every one. I'm sort of glad that we're talking about communication style, because I think that's a big part of any group dynamic, or the question of whether we are a group or whatever. I think you got a 1,200 people in the Facebook group and 4, 5, 10 people joining the calls, so there's a big difference in the number there. I wonder if there's a maximum number of that you could have in a call. So I guess I'm curious about the form of it, and I'm happy to meet people. I'm happy to meet you, Sam, and curious about you. I saw a cat in the background. Curious about your how. One thing that hasn't come up a lot in these calls is what people actually do for a living, or how they actually make their money. Because people talk about collaborating, but most of the things that people talk about collaborating on sound a lot like side projects and not like main areas of focus. So I have curiosity about that. I know Jazz pretty well. We've had many conversations. Alex, I seem to remember a long time, relatively long time ago, you were very reluctant to join the video calls, and I'm glad to see that you've decided to join. And I think that's I remember that being a big hurdle for you. So I'm happy to see you here. And Sam, I'm grateful to you for hosting this. And it's I like there being a small number of people so we can actually have a chat. But I don't have a topic in mind. Other than getting to know you.
I appreciate those thoughts. I think perhaps, the thing that for me distinguishes barn raising from perhaps some of the other GCC calls is that I am actively trying to ask the question, can we make agreements? Can we make decisions? Can we take some action, whether initially individually or perhaps later on as little groups of 2 or 3 or 4, perhaps even larger? And for that to happen, what needs to happen? Those are the questions I'm asking. Mm-hmm. So under the guise of how does successful collaboration scale, potentially to planetary impact? That's the set of questions that I group under this term I call collaborology.
Those are hard questions.
I get that you appreciate that. And I initially, when I formed that word, I was expecting people to laugh at me. And over time, I'm not quite so concerned anymore about whether people laugh at me because I think there are some real questions there. Now, some of those questions have heretofore been grouped under ODN, organizational development, or they've been grouped under psychology, or they've been grouped under management and leadership, et cetera, et cetera. But, there's a inherent assumption here in that the collaboration I'm looking at is with autonomous entities, not where anyone has power over others. And where we can find that alignment and yet still scale to planetary impact is what I'm trying to figure out. Now, you can think about Occupy, you can think about Anonymous, you can think about a number of other examples. I am curious about Anonymous, and I am curious about Occupy. And in fact, one of our participants in GCC, Joshua Bridge, was actually quite active in Occupy. So he and I do have a lot of discussions, and we actually have a number of things that we see differently. So we're still exploring all of that. Anyway, so appreciate that. So the barns that we're talking about creating what are those artifacts? Beginning with agreements, beginning with little statements or decisions or actions. And I'm always trying to be as succinct as possible. So it takes a long time to really distill down to the core elements. And that's what I'm always curious about doing. So just in brief, I'm going to spend another minute to describe what I'm here for is to find people who want to do good, who want to be explicit and transparent about doing good, who want to hold themselves accountable to themselves and to possibly to others, because if you stay in your own head, you're just going to be spinning, your own self around. You need at least 2 others who know you well enough to help you hold yourself accountable. And by doing so, I want to find other people who find these practices valuable, because I want to know that I want to interact and collaborate with other people who hold themselves accountable so that we can actually amplify and resonate with each other. And I'm hoping that that scales. That's my belief. I can't prove it, but I'm trying to do that. That's why I'm here. Over.
Yeah, I guess one of the questions I have is what's the minimum number of agreements you need to make to be able to collaborate?
I don't think there's a fixed answer to that. I really don't. It depends on, what the possibilities are that you want to co-create. Mm-hmm. Well, there may be a minimum. The minimum might be, what does it take to get into a conversation to start with? Showing up at the right time, being at the same place, using the same language, more or less.
Yeah, well, I mean, we seem to have some cohesion here today without having to work too hard at it.
Well, just to give you a story, prior to this particular call, for 2 hours prior, there was another call called PKE, the Practical Knowledge Ecology. You might have actually encountered that one. So in that one, there were about 4 or 5 people that attended. And there was one 5 or 10 minute interaction, which was a little bit, let's say it's worthy of study as a case study in collaborology. So one of the conclusions from that PKE call is we're actually going to study that and spread that around and see what other people take from it. But I was definitely a participant in that little interaction. So we're always finding cases where we can learn and possibly alter behavior and outlook. And I welcome those. Some people might find those difficult or uncomfortable. That's what Jazz was talking about. And I still think that that's one case where we have to figure out how to be able to disagree and be curious about differences and do that well, without it being an attack on ourselves. And that's why this issue of safety is so important. Now, the people in that call, I don't think they have issues with safety. You know, those are the people that show up. But I do know that others who are looking at this, one of the reasons they don't participate is they don't feel safe, either to be heard or to be initially accepted or to be welcomed or to be valued. That is definitely an obstacle. And I hold 2 positions on that. One is when we're in a group, if there is a mission or a purpose or a topic that the group is pursuing, then the things that present themselves internally as conflicts might be best addressed offline, quote unquote. On the other hand, if they recur as a pattern, then that's a group issue. And it takes some discernment to understand whether it's one or the other. That's an abstract statement. I know we can go into a lot of different case studies on that one, but that's an abstract statement. Over for now. Can you guys hear the airplane flying overhead? Actually, it's a helicopter.
It can sound like a garbled, muffled noise in the background. I can't identify it as an aircraft.
Probably about 10 or 15 miles away, there's a small little community airport that is having a fly-in 3-day weekend event. So a number of little small planes are flying in and out, and there's hot air balloons, and there's food, and there's people, and there's, you know, kids activities. So I see a lot of air activity yesterday and today, and again tomorrow, that I don't normally see here. So taking silence as an opportunity. I wanted to go back to something Jaswinder said, which is, I made a reference 2 or 3 weeks ago, probably for multiple Saturdays now, that these components that we've been discussing, which initially for the first year or two seemed jumbled and chaotic, are resulting in insights that for me are falling into place and are complementing each other. And I was initially voicing this in the PKE call earlier today as an architecture of what it is that GCC, and in particular barn raising, is engaged with. And I've been saying I need to write this up, I need to diagram it. It's been clarifying in my own time. I've not yet taken the time to write it and to diagram it. it is really important for me personally that I do it, because I'm finding that I hold back the group in Just Winter's model if I actually don't offer it for consideration. So now I am trying to unblock myself from holding that back, and I have to find the time to write it up, diagram it, send it around for conversation. So that is now one of my calls to action. But in my mind, it is definitely something that I would like some engagement on. So,
could you kind of take a stab at it now at high level? Take us on a.
Might I ask permission to do that for about 2 minutes?
Yeah.
Just Winder, Alex?
I'm going to eventually relate the idea I had about a token me carry on your person or your device, install it on your device. It's a physical piece of hardware that carries your cryptographic DNA sort of thing, you know, and that counts your time and attention on specific websites, or counts your contribution to different groups.
See, that's another topic that's hot and present for me, but let me address that second. Thank you. So the idea in rough, very, very rough form, and I'm going to try and clarify this, is while we are still individuals, while there is no formal we, what I would like to see is that we do an action that I call co-visioning. What is it that we'd like to co-create? What is it that we want the future or the present to look like? What society would we like to live in? What practices are we engaged in when we interact with each other? That co-visioning, if done individually and then shared, hopefully allows us to mutually inform each other about how we conduct ourselves on a daily basis. The decisions we make. Do I pick up that piece of trash? Do I give that person $1? You know, do I actually, you know, sweep the sidewalk? Do I actually do my laundry? You know, those kind of things. All the way up to, do I attend that meeting? Do I write this blog? Do I listen to that video? That co-visioning, that is the motivating factor for how we actually guide ourselves. It's our compass for how we make decisions throughout the day and throughout our lives. Because that's the way I want us to behave, because I don't want me to be doing something simply because I'm being paid for it, or simply because somebody with more power has told me to do it. Now, in order to do that well, we need to be able to communicate these visions, these values, these practices, these protocols, these artifacts. And that involves being able to share information, be able to share insight, be able to share knowledge, all the way down to being able to share data, being able to even share chaos, noise. That's where we start. That then means if we have this co-visioning process, the next step is, what am I doing? And then how can we do it together? And that's an examination of possibilities. So tools around that let us model, let us simulate, let us make agreements. There's a whole class of things there that is up for discussion. And then underneath that layer is the fundamental aspect of what is an agreement. What is a decision? What is an action? And how can we do that together? Individually, yeah, we can, you know, it doesn't matter what you use as long as I don't have to collaborate with you, right? But if once we're going to collaborate, we want to say, you know, share these things. What am I doing? What are my values? What are my objectives? And a lot of that comes through clarifying what we mean. If I use a certain phrase and we're meeting for the very first time, that phrase means almost nothing to you. It means whatever it's meant to you for the last 50 years, but you don't know how it's been used by me for the last 50 years. So that clarification opportunity is a whole set of phenomena that there's practices and protocols and tools around. So that in a very rough, abstract form, which may mean nothing to you, okay, but it means a hell of a lot to me, is how I'm architecting all the various different pieces of conversation that have taken place for the last 17 years, at least for me. If not, let's see, it goes back to 1991, so this is 27 years. That's about when I met Doug Engelbart and really got my eyes opened about the possibilities for these ways of working together. So if that meant something to you, that's great. If it didn't mean anything to you, wait a few weeks or months, because I'm going to write that up and diagram it. Okay. Hopefully it means more to those who have actually heard me speak over a course of months or years. Maybe Alex and Just Wonder could either confirm or deny, because that may have been too abstract. But anyway, that's where my thinking is at the moment, and I gotta diagram it and write it up. Over.
Seems fairly accurate to me.
So this Zoom here would be an example of a tool that we're using.
This is a place where we meet. Place, taken, of course, in cyberspace.
Mm-hmm.
I had a story I wanted written up as a cartoon script, and I found a lot of people on Freelancer willing to do it for $40,
Did you ask Harry to do it?
I haven't asked Harry, no. But I should, because it's a good idea. And Harry's got specifically directed talents, that those characters he uses are so mind-bogglingly simple yet effective. So it's really good. It's a talent, very good talent.
Yeah, I asked him to draw something up, and he did a very good job. Now I'm trying to get a copy of it. So to go one step further, the reason I think barn raising to me is interesting is I want those ideas to either be invitations to collaborate or invitations to refine the model and the thinking. Because I do know that none of this is going to be perfect at any time. So I look always to be able to improve it. So that's why I'm here presenting what it is that I think I can express, knowing that it's imperfect, knowing that it's inviting potential refinement.
And did you say you've been doing this for a couple of years?
Well, some of those ideas go all the way back to 1991 when I first met Doug Engelbart. But the idea of this global simulation environment based on a dynamic knowledge repository where we can actually test knowledge by executing it, predicting, and then evaluating what it's predicting. That idea was formed in 2009, and a friend of mine gave it the name Global Sim. I still don't like the name, but I haven't found a better one. But it's a way for us to actually make decisions and action plans together and predict the outcomes better than just binary voting.
Do you have any examples of successful projects things that you would point to as things you're proud of?
Not as, okay, so that'll take a lot of time to relate, but let me just talk in abstract yet again, perhaps, hopefully this will be a little bit more understandable, is that if I've got someone with a PhD model in hydrology, and I've got somebody else with a PhD model in nutrition, and I got somebody else with an economics degree in world famine, and if I've got somebody else with a degree in geophysics, okay, maybe there's a way to take all of those models and create a model for food distribution. And that today is what I would love to see. Now, if each of those 4 people could actually publish their models, and each of the 4 of us in this room could take those 4 models and say, well, that parameter is a little bit wrong. Instead of 0.3, it ought to be 0.25. And I can then fork that model and refine it myself. Or if I can say, I actually like these 3, but I don't like that one on hydrology. So I'm going to take this other hydrology model from the University of Moscow and bring it over, and I'm going to snap it on to these other 3. And now let's take the world's weather data. Let's take the world's population data. Let's run it through these models. And let's see which of them actually feeds the most people with the most healthy food with the greatest efficiency or whatever. Now you notice that the way I evaluate that model might be health, might be efficiency, might be loss of wastage, but somebody else might actually optimize for something else. Somebody else might optimize for immediacy of availability to food, whether it's a grow local initiative, or whether it's a go vegan initiative, or whether it's a go vegetarian initiative, or go gluten free. Okay, but the point to this is that if we specify how the model works and what goes into the model, and we're for all able to apply our own evaluation criteria to it and to refine those models, then all of a sudden I can actually engage with you to say, hey, Dave, I use 0.25 here, you use 0.27, why? And you can say, well, I've got this other 17 models that gave me the 0.27, whereas you only picked this 0.25 out of your butt. Now I've got something to learn from. Okay, and now we can actually make better ideas, better models, better prediction, and therefore better decisions and better action plans than billionaires spending billions of dollars telling us what is the right solution. That is the worst model in the world. I would rather invert the whole decision-making process so that we all co-create these possibilities rather than just spending 15 seconds each checking yes or no, with only a few people coming up with those options. Like the DNC and the Republican National Committee come up with 2 really poor candidates, and 350 million of us have to spend 10 seconds doing a yes or a no. I'd rather invert that. I'd rather have all 350 million of us coming up with the right answers, the right decision-making practices, the right policies, the right budgeting model, the right action plans, the right infrastructure construction model. And maybe up comes, several viable options, in which case we now need to discuss those, okay? But that's a much better process, in my opinion, than the quote-unquote democracy that we have today. So that's a minor rant. Sorry about that. I'm just kind of using that as an example here, okay? So we've been going about trying to introduce you to what the barn raising has been and what it means for me personally for about the last hour. I'm actually okay with what we've done. Normally these calls go on for longer, but if we've actually come to a natural point, there's no need to force it to go longer.
I'm enjoying it.
All right, let me ask you this. What other forums have you engaged in that might be directed towards sustainability, thrivability, a better future, better global governance? Or is this the first opportunity you've had to do something like that?
There's a number of groups that I've been involved with that meet face to face, and that are sort of once a year or every other year or once in a while, get kind of just groups of people that get together to work, talk about stuff and hang out and do weekend retreats and that kind of thing, that I've been involved with. I'm not so much, I wouldn't say I'm so much interested in this idea of global sustainability movements as I am interested in the process of how people connect online and collaborate together on stuff. What you just described is almost so kind of mind-bogglingly huge. I don't know how you start to get a handle on it. It's a big vision, and here we are, 4 people. And even in the group, 1,200 people seems like a lot, but it's not really that many. In terms of what when you talk about 350 million, So I'm just trying to wrap my head around what you just were talking about is something that, well, yeah, it's just, I mean, I'm just trying to wrap my brain around it.
I saw a opportunity for a viral growth tribe, a global or global tribe. Global is the equivalent of a global organization that's split up into smaller groups, regional. But if the system was broken because of the economic calculations were not taking in sustainability issues, it's because the environment wasn't considered in those equations. The corporations are only figuring out how much profit they can get from the forest and the mine. Bugger the atmosphere. But things have changed now. They're forced to consider the costs to the environment, and that changes the economic equation totally, turns it on its head. It turns the whole system upside down now. And that reluctantly corporations are coming to the realization that we can't go on as we were before. Things have to change. And one person can add 2 friends to a startup, his own startup, sovereign group in their local region, and try and get those 2 people to read the manual, the community of impact agreement. So they become willing to make a pledge to the planet that they will find 2 people to read this operating manual called the Pledge to the Planet. Or
I mean,
you could call it the global collaboration of individuals who join together for the sake of the environment. And some of those groups that grow from the viral expansion might turn their attention to planting trees, especially if there's corporations supporting the idea with sponsorship deals because they need the advertising space. Over.
I mean, I think that, I think 1, 2, 3 people, there are a lot more tools and things than there used to be for small groups of people to instigate startups or, change initiatives or, to make things happen. And I like to see that, and I like to support that when I can.
We Squarespace, GoDaddy, WordPress.
Yeah. Things like Zoom. I think what I've noticed is there's something about the face-to-face conversation, and then the video conferencing tools have gotten good enough and, kind of robust enough that it's easier to have these face-to-face conversations than ever has been before online. And I think there's something about the face-to-face connection that builds community more than a lot of these other tools. So the fact that there's 4 of us here and that we're able to communicate and have a conversation, to me is really exciting. It doesn't really matter what it's about right now to me. The fact that we can just be here and with each other, and even that I know that you're hearing helicopters and airplanes and you're seeing hot air balloons out your window, to me that's interesting. And it takes a while to get to know people. It doesn't happen in one conversation. And you have, when you're in your local community, you're limited in much more limited in the kinds of people that you can connect with. Whereas once you get online, you have a lot more choices of the types of people that you interact with and find and connect with. And so I think of this as a group where I might find like-minded people.
something that occurred to me once I'd got over the hurdle of my reluctance to engage online, was the camaraderie and the things that resonated with my intention. You know, your deepest agenda, if you like. Everyone brings their own agenda to the meeting, and you put it on the table. If it gets feedback that's constructive, that's great. If it gets criticized and you feel your emotions are damaged, that means you need to work on something. Over.
Dave, I should know this, but what's your last name?
Sorry, talking to me?
I think you're the only Dave here. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Gray, David Gray.
Gray. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I'm feeling that until I write up the ideas that I've been talking about, I'm continuing to wave my hands and talk in abstractions, and I would prefer to be a bit more grounded. So I'm feeling a call to action to actually spend some time writing and diagramming. So I don't yet have anything else to bring to this group for today.
Or barn raising?
I mean, there's a whole Trello space with dozens of ideas, but I haven't gone through them to pick any of them out. So I'm curious whether you guys have something that wants to emerge, or whether we should call it a day, or how should we proceed with possibly more time?
I'm fine either way.
So last week, sorry, Alex, you were saying?
I was going to mention I'd like to have a powwow with the men's group. We'll open a men's group meeting on Wednesday or something. That'll spike the interest with the women. Over.
Actually, the women do have a women's group meeting on Tuesdays.
Oh, that's interesting.
I'm not party to it, so I don't know how active it is, but I do know there's a women's group on Tuesdays.
Well, that's interesting. Well,
we should poke our nose in and say the men's group's feeling a bit lonely.
Created their own space.
Yeah, I think that probably has something to do with the safety factor.
Mm-hmm.
I know I've pissed off a number of women in this group.
Oh, really?
I mean, almost every woman I've mentioned, I've pissed off at one time or another.
I mean, it's like almost many groups by default are men's groups, aren't they? I've noticed, especially online in the video chat, that they are often dominated by men. I'm not sure I know why, but
I think I have to take up yoga.
I'd like to be a fly on the wall.
Yeah, they don't publish those though, do they?
Those yoga sessions?
No, the women's group. I haven't seen any of those published.
No, those are not published for public consumption.
Maybe that's part of the safety of it. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's safer to not be public or published.
Yeah, Heidi publishes quite a few videos from the Wisdom Factory, which is a group that some of the other women attend.
So I'm curious, Dave, you say you're between things. What were you doing previously?
Oh, well, I was a consultant, and I'm a published author, so I did a lot of public speaking and consulting and workshops and training. And my expertise was complexity and visual thinking. So I did a lot. I'm pretty good friends with Harry, sort of in that community that he's in, visual thinking community.
Are you hooked into anybody at the Santa Fe Institute then?
Well, I'd love to be. I'm aware of it. I follow their work, but I'm not, no, I'm not connected with anybody in particular. I follow the work of, who's the guy, West, Jeffrey West. And he's been publishing some really interesting stuff on cities and.
So maybe in a way to provoke another discussion, what is complexity?
Oh, well, there's a definition of a complex adaptive system, that it's something that is more than the sum of its parts, and that it's something that has the ability to learn and adapt.
Maybe it's the absence of simplicity.
It's different than, people talk about complexity being different than complicated, because something that's complicated is like a car. It can be taken apart and reassembled, and it doesn't necessarily learn and adapt to change, whereas a complex adaptive system is more like say a beehive or a city that, it has the ability, has memory in the system. So when you interact with it, it reacts differently based on, it learning over time. So,
Yeah. So complex
system, you poke it once and it does one thing, and you poke it again, it has learned, and you might find it reacts differently. So it changes, adapts over time.
Adaptable and unpredictable.
Yeah, and I wrote a book called The Connected Company, which is, about companies like Amazon that are designed to be complex adaptive systems, as opposed to the traditional form of a company that's sort of designed like a machine. And so I find those kinds of emerging forms of organization really interesting. And I mean, what you're talking about in terms of global collaboration is you're trying to design a complex adaptive system, something that is emergent, something that is sort of self-organizing.
Yeah. People have talent and ability. Sorry, Sam.
Sorry. If I might just follow up on that. What I hear you describing is an adaptive system.
Mm-hmm.
What adds the complexity to it? And what does the complexity mean?
Well, I think it's mostly a matter of scale, right? So the internet, for example, you have protocols for connecting web pages and making links, but the whole is much greater than the sum of its parts. So your brain is a complex adaptive system because you've got so many connections that you have emergent properties that can't be explained by the sum of the parts. Consciousness, for example, is an emergent property of the brain. You can't predict consciousness from looking at the parts of the brain. So I think when an adaptive system is small and really simple, it might not be complex. But as it grows, as it scales, you start to have complexity come in. Something that's simple is easier to understand. You can deconstruct it. I'm trying to think what a simple adaptive system might be, like a cell.
A database.
A simple neural net.
Mm-hmm.
See, if we could measure the bots, web bots and spiders, measuring people's activity online, the time they spend and where they spend the time, what ads they click. So if that can be extended, the machine language can go into the values of the person they're looking at as well, and the talents. It gains by the complexity. The deepening complexity gives it more data to work with. Therefore, it can make better algorithms and decisions.
Yeah, I would say, I think that, the one characteristic of a complex adaptive system is that it exhibits emergent properties that are unpredictable.
See, to me, I think, let me see if I understand you right. Because for me, when we go for different scales of phenomena, like if we take physics, for example, one thing you could say about physics is we can't necessarily, by looking at subatomic behavior, extract necessarily Newtonian mechanics or even biology. Or can you? But even if you do, it's in the terminology of something that's very different from that very specific domain. You have to evolve new observation techniques, new experimental techniques, new terminology to go from physics to chemistry, from chemistry to biology, from biology to physiology, from physiology to medicine, from physiology to social systems, to psychology, to organizational design. Well, now you could say, oh, no, I could extract all of that because it's all there.
Well, I mean, those to me you're almost describing languages or semantic systems that we use to try and describe those systems, as opposed to the
right. But they're all describing different emergent properties from the domain underneath it, quote unquote.
They are emergent. They are emergent. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And if you look at the universe, that's at least 80 to 100 orders of magnitude of behavior.
Language. I mean, I think you could say that a language is a complex adaptive system. It evolves over time as it's used, as people interact using language. The new words emerge, and the dictionary changes and evolves. So any language or symbolic system that is used is going to be a complex adaptive system, I would say. So when you're describing all of these examples, they are emergent.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of more data is not necessarily a good thing, because you get a situation sometimes where you've got rubbish in, rubbish out. Focused. Data collection needs to be, to a certain extent, discriminating against the rubbish that won't help its calculations. They won't assist its algorithms. They just clog up the system and make it.
Claire, it's advanced cancer.
Sorry about that.
It's all right. Complexity is in a way is another language system.
Over away. Open Table is your guide.
See, David,
to the dining capitals.
here's a problem. I actually did an Amazon search of books by David Wolf, and all these videos started playing.
David Wolf.
David Gray, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know if they're me or mine or not. Should be David Gray.
In contrast with the finite created world, so he personified this aspect of the primordial waters.
Anyway, I can put links to my books. I'll put my author page in the chat. Just give me a sec.
That's a good idea. I'll go and look for my blog link.
Yeah, it looks like davidgray.com. Is that yours or not?
No, but I'm going to give you my Amazon author page here. Hold on.
Okay.
I'll put in the chat. Well, thank you for looking at that.
Because it suggests you're a musician and you're in a band.
No, I'm not that David Gray. No, there's a musician, David Gray. Yeah.
Any last closing statements from anyone?
Oh, thank you for hosting, and I appreciate hearing your thoughts. It's nice to see everyone.
Yeah, at some point, if I get to visit my brother out in St. Louis, I might let you know.
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
I do it every 20 years.
Okay. That sounds great. There's not a lot of reasons to come here.
I liked it when I was there, but yeah, I mean, I was amazed at real estate prices when I went there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can live pretty well on not a lot of money.
Okay.
So thank you, Sam.
Thank you for showing up and participating. Jazz, Alex, any last statements?
I've got my links on my profile on Facebook, but the link I just put in the chat's only to an image I made, an interesting image, by the way.
All right, thanks.
Good session.
Going once, going twice. Have a good week, all. Perhaps see you tomorrow at the unblocking.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye for now.